Hi, this is Take Charge Your Health with Corinne Fernari, clinical nutritionist, physician assistant, and Carol Peterson, pharmacist. Listen, learn, and I hope you enjoy the show. Bye.
Welcome back. This is Take Charge of Your Health with Corinne Fernari, clinical nutritionist and physician assistant, and my co-host, Carol Peterson, pharmacist. Every week, we present you with new and creative ways to help you make sense of health information. With years of clinical experience between us and research into traditional and cutting-edge technologies, we give you practical information to help you take charge of your health. Welcome back. We have an exciting show today focused on you and your health. As always, I'm here with my co-host,
Carol Peterson.
And we have James LaValle, and he is the author of the Metabolic Code, Cracking the Metabolic Code, and 20 other books. And he's been on our show before, and we asked him back because we want to discuss with all the news that's happening. And there is a reality base to it, but there's other pieces, and we want to discuss them. Our families and the increased COVID, and we're afraid to get together with our friends and people we love. Well, that's one piece of it, the external caution. But there's another piece of it that empowers us. We want to see how we can empower ourselves in that situation to create better outcomes. Carol, can you introduce James for us, please?
Sure, or may we call you Jim?
Jim's great.
Okay.
Okay. Good. I've met you before, Jim. I'm sure you don't remember, but so I'm a pharmacist like you, so I'm always proud of when somebody, like my mother would say, "You're not a real pharmacist." And I think I take great pride in not being a real pharmacist. And you've taken your pharmacy education. You've become certified in clinical nutrition. You've got a doctorate in naturopathy. But you have worked and built a team to work with you. You have LaValle Metabolic Practice. So you have been working with people from all walks of life, but you've especially have focused on working with high-performance athletes. And I have some experience with that through my husband. I think, in a way, they can be a model. We can deceptively think athletes are healthy when they might not be healthy, which I think we can go a little bit deeper into what is health, how do we do it. Athletes, I know, are really fine people for working on a program and sticking to it. And maybe that should be our model, but I'd love to hear your opinion on it. So welcome, Jim, to our show, Take Charge of Your Health. I hope after talking with you, we'll have many more tools to do exactly that. Let's start with a question. We just talked with you briefly, and you said a word, metabolic inflammation or metaflammation. And is that a key point of what you want to talk about today as we get into this subject?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? I just got off a 2-hour educational webinar I gave to pharmacists about this topic. So I am primed and ready to go. So
Yay.
So, So
we get the benefit.
You do. My juices are flowing. So the big thing about metabolic inflammation or metaflammation is that our body triggers inflammation in order to repair something. And then when it doesn't fully repair it, it's supposed to turn off. So your inflammation in your body is supposed to turn off, and your body kind of resets the circuits back to operating well. Well, the problem is when people overtrain. Maybe their nutrition isn't right. Maybe they're under a lot of stress and not sleeping well. Maybe they're exposed to an environmental burden, or they're on drug therapies that might be altering. I wrote a book, actually several books, on drug-induced nutrient depletion, where you're on certain drugs that are depleting nutrients from your body, changing the metabolic function of your body, and now you can't turn off that inflammation signal. It starts to become chronic. And that chronic inflammation signal leads to several things. One of the big things is hyperlipidemia, and that you start to make more damaging lipid compounds like oxidized LDL or rusted cholesterol. You also can create other inflammatory lipids like apolipoprotein B. But, in the end, just think of, I make bad lipids, I start to change the way I make my iron stores, and I no longer store iron adequately, and now I'm a little anemic. I start to become insulin resistant when my chronic inflammation is up. My insulin receptors don't function as well, and now my blood glucose starts to go up. It starts to change the way your nervous system works. You lose what's called the neuroplasticity of your neurons, so you can't signal. Your neurons in your brain can't signal, hey, I feel good, and hey, I feel focused, and hey, I feel alert, and gee, I'm ready to go to sleep now. But even more importantly, inflammation over time damages your cells and can lead to things like progressing to neurodegenerative disorders and cancers. So it's really important to understand that all of us, whether you're a super athlete or, a lot of my practice is still people suffering from chronic illnesses. So I've got super athletes, and I got people struggling with irritable bowel and autoimmune disorders and metabolic syndrome, and I got them both. And you know what? In the end, we still look for the same issues. What's causing your metabolism to be triggering inflammatory signaling, and then what do we do about it? So that's and the thing about metaflammation is it goes to another term that's in the clinical literature, because I didn't invent metaflammation. Metaflammation is in the clinical. It's in the clinical literature.
I never heard it before. I thought you made it up.
I know, but I'm always just out there tapping on the cutting edge. So metaflammation is a term in the clinical literature, and another term is inflammaging. Inflammatory aging. So it turns out, as we're metabolically inflamed and we're accelerating the damage to our tissues, that we accelerate our aging process. And what we're all about is, not real pharmacists. we're all about reversing that trend and giving people the vitality they deserve at whatever stage in life they're in, and increasing what I call their health span through adopting a health style, meaning a lifestyle that promotes health. And that's what I love to talk about. So that's metaflammation and inflammatory aging, known as inflammaging.
I think people don't have the connection in their mind how chronic inflammation creates chronic diseases. They don't have that connected, that chronic inflammation is very directly related to autoimmune diseases, which we're seeing left and right. And they really don't understand. Let's talk about a base and then walk up the base. And the base can be, and not can be, the base is foods, lifestyle, inflammation, insulin. And then you just walk right up the pyramid to this problem, to that problem, or this getting resolved or that getting resolved as the base shifts. And so people haven't gotten that connection that well. And Carol said something also that I've experienced in my practice. I had a NBA basketball player, 6'7" in my practice, walks in, this beautiful, strong man, just coming from the gym, working out every day, and comes in. He had hurt his ankle, but it was healing. But he came in, and the end result was I began to understand that many of these people and many of these athletes are incredibly deficient. As we started building them up piece by piece by piece, he began to get a new level of vitality, a new level. He said taking IV amino acids was like eating a steak for him. He just felt solid. He felt strong. He said, and he would
Did you flavor that?
Exactly.
He flavored amino acids.
Exactly.
At least get him a little benefit.
So what happens is I began to realize that even in people who visually can look good, there can be some significant deficiencies there that need to be balanced to move people forward. And that's what I was finding in this incredibly physical man who really stresses himself to the max to get the max performance out of himself. Have you seen that in your practice?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I have players in all 5 major league sports. So I have NBA teams and players. I have NFL football players, Major League Soccer players, a lot of NHL players, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, soccer. And it's interesting because you'll see things like stress fractures. Mm-hmm. And you see stress fractures because their diet's not right, they're training a lot, they don't have enough minerals on board, so they get acidotic, their pH changes. And then they start to melt their bone down, right? Because as your pH goes acidic, you lose bone in order to keep the pH in your bloodstream intact.
Balance.
And so we regularly see in our track athletes, actually I do a lot of track too, so there's 6 sports. I just did a track athlete this week. So it's very common to see changes in their mineral status, low electrolyte status, their pHs are off, their glucose is too high because, I've had players that, ate sour gummy worms in red velvet cake at night before I got a hold of them is their nighttime snack. And wondering why their belly hurt when they were playing the next game the next day. And so, absolutely, as we correct these issues, they get better. And here's the thing. Well, the thing I always try to get across to folks is the only difference between an athlete and everyday one of us is they're training a lot so they stay leaner more easily, because most of us, we eat too much, we eat too often, we eat too late, we pick the wrong foods, we stress out, and we don't get enough sleep. That's where it starts. So we throw off our insulin and cortisol, right? And once we throw off insulin and cortisol, blood pressure goes up, we get insulin resistant, we start triggering these inflammatory compounds that lead to our blood vessels being stiffer, that lead to our inflammation signaling starting to plaque our arteries, and that's where it gets a little bit different. We put weight on easier. It doesn't mean just because, I always tell this to docs because I teach a lot of docs and pharmacists how to evaluate people. I say, don't be deceived by exactly what you said. An Adonis walks in, this beautifully conditioned-looking man or woman. Don't be deceived by their look, that they are beautiful metabolically on the inside. And so, if you're a fan of sports, guess what? On Sunday, when you turn the football games on, don't sit there all day and pound the nachos and potato chips and cookies and beers all day long. Put a vegetable tray out. Try to, manage your calorie intake. Start to pick more responsible and vital foods. And guess what? It doesn't hurt to move and get off the couch. people think they need to drink a pre-workout drink, an intra-workout drink, and a post-workout drink just because they exercise 45 minutes. And I really encourage them. It's like, look, just start walking. And you just said it. It's about lifestyle. Am I going to get to bed at a decent hour? Am I going to unload my stress with a little deep breathing? Am I going to strive for 7 to 9 hours of restful sleep? Am I going to manage my stress? Pick foods that don't trigger a high insulin, because the number one most inflammatory response in your body is post-meal hyperglycemia, and that's the number one cause of heart disease.
Oh, that's interesting.
Full circle.
I haven't seen that. So you're talking about the more higher glycemic foods will give you a high blood glucose immediately after you eat. You could be measuring this. And then that is an instigator of heart disease. There's spikes in high glucose.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. You can measure your blood sugar 1 hour postprandial. If it's over 125, you're probably triggering inflammation. 2 hours postprandial, it should go back to normal.
Okay, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people keep a peak much longer.
Of course, and that shows insulin resistance. They're pumping out plenty of insulin, and remember, insulin is the most inflammatory compound in your body when it's overproduced. When you make too much insulin, you trigger adrenaline and noradrenaline to be released, and that makes your blood vessels more stiff, and that's why people with insulin resistance end up with hypertension, because their blood vessels to their kidneys start to get cramped down, like putting a clamp on a hose, and now I've got to push harder on my blood vessels. My blood vessels aren't as pliable. They're more stiff. The blood flow is reduced, and now I get what's called renal hypertension, which is 40% of new hypertensive cases, and it's actually a big part of people that are insulin resistant, which, by the way, 38% of the adult population in the U.S. is insulin resistant. Between 12 and 13% are already diabetic. So it's 1 out of every 2 adults are the kind of people we're talking about now. So you've got to learn how to pick foods that do not spike your glucose, do not spike your insulin, and more importantly, make sure you're getting that 45-minute walk in 5 to 6 days a week to help to regulate your nervous system and your blood glucose. And that doesn't count for the fact that when people are eating bad foods, they're depleted of chromium, they're depleted of magnesium, they're depleted of potassium, they're depleted of their zinc and their B vitamins, which are all essential in the relationship related to your insulin function. So nutrients matter, lifestyle matters, food selection and exercise matters, and then we can start to talk about what nutrients help that.
Now,
I'm thinking about a couple of the drugs that are designed for high blood pressure, like beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. Their direct effect is to try and manage adrenaline. So aren't we much better off avoiding the drugs and going back to managing our blood sugar and not create this whole cascade leading us to chronic drug taking with all the side effects induced by those drugs? It's a nasty sequelae to everything built one on top of another.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's people there are people that aren't going to take care of themselves. We just have to accept that they're going to eat what they want, not move, stay up late, drink too much alcohol, whatever. And drugs are especially important for those folks to control the progression of their illness because they're not taking responsibility. We want people to, and I'm not being critical of those people.
well,
Everybody
I think
comes
we
to the
can.
point in their life.
I think we can be critical of them because we as a society are paying for them.
Well, I know, but being in practice now, like you, for 38 years I've been in practice. And what I find is most people will end up at a place of saying, I want to change. But everybody, it's not easy
But they
to
don't
get everybody
begin
to
there.
do that at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
And that's the point I'm making.
Uh-huh.
And so I'll tell you, the silver lining around a very dark cloud is COVID.
that's what I wanted to get.
More
Go on.
Yeah.
And then I want to say something. Go on.
No, I mean, it's there because it's important because more people than ever now are asking about how can I get healthy.
Well,
Because of all the people that had the most adverse event from COVID were people with very low vitamin D status, people that were overweight, people with blood pressure problems, people that were diabetic, people with autoimmunity. Those were the people that had the most, consequential sequelae. And so that's why it's important we talk about these things and motivate people to make change.
Well,
it's important because they're not taught it. Nobody's taught how to live healthy.
That's my big complaint that has happened, in that we have had the perfect opportunity, and our medical geniuses and our government have just let this fall by the wayside and told us to wash our hands and wear a mask. And that's the extent, and stay away from your family. And that's the extent of what is being shared with us from our medical, national, international geniuses. And I find that offensive, and I find it demeaning to our population, and we're not being given direction. It's now come down to shows like this, to you on the internet, to people to get the information out that we're not powerless. We can deal with this on different levels. And you said one area, but I want to go into this in depth. You said vitamin D. We know that those people with low vitamin D end up with worse outcomes, higher death rates, longer illness, worse outcomes. We know that. But how many people have you seen, other than a few newscasters who stop reading their written text, look up and say, well, maybe you should be taking vitamin D. But that's the only time we ever hear it, and it's only occasional. So I want to talk about, we're going to be in different situations right now. I want to talk about how we can empower ourselves in those situations and help ourselves. Everything that you talked about in terms of risk factors, those were all lifestyle-mediated diseases. So I'd like to talk about the deficit of our public officials and what we as individuals, as heads of families, as support in our community, can do in our communities to help ourselves get healthier. Have any thoughts?
Well, oh, no, I don't. And you should really tell me what you're thinking. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think it's atrocious that we don't have a public broadcasting system telling everybody to go get a bottle of vitamin D, and if you're in a lower income area, let's go throw bottles of vitamin D out into the streets if we need to, because it's cheap. It's cheap. You can get their levels up relatively quickly, anybody's. And it really is a huge, I don't know if you saw the study that came out of, I think it was Indonesia, but it just came out. They looked at 793 participants, and people that had a vitamin D of 17 or below basically had 100% mortality, and people above 31 survived. Now, I'm not saying 31 is the number to shoot for. I think people should have a vitamin D level above 55 myself. I think it's better when you look at across all studies and you look at the relative impact of D against a variety of conditions and disorders. 55 is the minimal target, and the range of 30 to 100, which is the common lab value for D. And obviously we can pick apart the other nutrients that are clearly important as it relates to cold and flu season and this pandemic, like zinc status, right? Mm-hmm. Zinc status is important too. bioflavonoids, people that have adequate vitamin C status. There's some ancillary data on that. But I think we have to step back and say maybe we shouldn't be doing virtual happy hours and learning how to bake when we're when we're quarantining at home, triggering our insulin receptors and drinking more alcohol to actually weaken, gain the quarantine 15. You just have to remember, when you gain that 15 pounds, those fat cells are just pouring out inflammatory compounds into your body. And so it's to your point, and I agree completely with what you're saying. We're not empowering people, and we should be. And I think it is insulting that we don't think that people want to be empowered. Because I worked the inner city. When I first came out of pharmacy school, I worked in the west end of Cincinnati in a health clinic working with very low-income people. And then my first pharmacy job was in very poor areas. And people of all economic income stratus are interested in what can I do. I learned that very early on in the late 70s and early 80s, that people want to know about what they can do to improve their health. So why haven't we grasped that as a national initiative yet? And I don't know the answer to that, right? Probably, politics, big pharma, the Dairy Council, and who knows what else. And it's playing a role in all that. And I'm not smart enough to figure all that out. Other than I know what's going on.
Serious censoring going on by the Federal Trade Commission. If you're talking about the virus and you're talking about ways to mitigate or make yourself stronger, there's a definite censoring going on. It's not only don't we have ready access, and we should have this information, I think, before in utero. Our moms and dads should be healthy people.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. You're right.
We should be raised with all this information about how we can help ourselves be the most healthy person we can. But we give away too much power to doctors who are trained in using drugs and nothing about how the body really works, what's the physiology. And Jim, you'll agree with me, so many drugs, as I mentioned, beta blockers, they're designed to block something, a physiologic thing, but nobody's asking the question, why do you have something in excess? What's missing to take it to the next step? And every metabolic process has a coenzyme and a cofactor, and this translates into vitamins and minerals. Simple as that.
We're speaking...
Well, and, beta blockers is a great area. You lose melatonin when you take a beta blocker, and melatonin is needed to regulate your circadian rhythm, and it's a valuable antioxidant for your brain, for your kidneys, for your intestine. And when you take an ARB or an ACE, which is an angiotensin drug, which is common for people with prediabetes and diabetes, because they make this compound that triggers something called angiotensin 2, and that makes your blood vessels get stiff. The consequence of that drug is zinc status gets lost, and zinc, super important for your immune system. You make T killer cells, mature T killer cells, by having adequate zinc, and people were on drug therapies that deplete these nutrients that then lead to the need for another drug. So people on beta blockers end up needing to be on something for sleep because they end up with insomnia. People that are on ARBs and ACEs, if they're men, their testosterones go down, their estrogens go up, and now that complicates their chemistry. But I'll tell you, there's things that people can do. So one of my favorite compounds for the 21st century, I love people taking aged garlic extract, and I really like aged garlic extract because, first of all, 850 peer-reviewed publications on it. That means there's a lot of science. The big thing that's interesting about it is that it's one of those remedies that bridges the gap between cardiovascular health and managing an appropriate immune response. so they found out that by lowering oxidized LDL, improving the pliability of your blood vessels so it lowers your blood pressure when you take it, it regresses necrotic plaque, it stops bone mineral density loss. In the end, it led him to that journey of saying, oh, wow, it affects your immune system. So it downregulates inflammatory cytokines, but yet readies your lymphocytes to fight off invaders. And actually, so tons of studies on cardiometabolic health, but now studies coming out on how it reduces duration of cold and flu, the reduction in severity of symptoms, reduction in the loss of work days. So this is one, not an incredibly expensive supplement.
Exactly.
In addition to vitamin D, in addition to magnesium, I think it's got so much science behind it, and people don't hear about it.
No,
right? They don't hear about it.
We're speaking with Jim LaValle, and he's the author of Cracking the Metabolic Code. This is Take Charge of Your Health. And I'm Corinne Fernari, clinical nutritionist, physician assistant with my co-host,
Carol Peterson.
Pharmacist. I get to brag about
not
you. See?
Not a real pharmacist.
Now, but not a real pharmacist, just a fake pharmacist. But garlic has been given since ancient Greek times to athletes to improve oxygen and improve their performance. We're also finding that, like you said, it reduces those who catch the colds or viruses, but it also reduces the days they're ill from 5 to 1.5, and that's been shown in multiple studies. And that's with the common cold, but it generally, they're also showing where it helps in bone loss. And so garlic is such an easy nutrient to take in. Why would we want to, it also enhances glutathione because it's a sulfur compound. So why would we want to age it? What does it do to age the garlic? Does it make it more bioavailable? Oh, and let me...
more than that.
Okay.
So go ahead.
One other thing is I was privy in my multiple years of clinical practice. Someone came in with this very concentrated garlic extract that they were going to be producing. It ended up not being produced, but it was very strong. And they said it would bring down blood sugar. And I gave it to multiple patients just free. Take this, let me monitor you. And I really didn't see much in blood sugar. But you know what I did see? Bar none. Every single one of these people who I had given this extract to, their blood pressure came down. Some from elevated to normal, some even, and people with normal got even better. But every single one of them, their blood pressure improved.
Yeah, well, it's important to understand eating garlic is good. The studies that I'm talking about, multiple studies on hypertension, regression of vulnerable plaque, improving your gamma delta T killer cell response from your gut, that's on aged garlic extract developed by Wakunaga of Japan over 60 years ago, grown in the U.S., organic soil, non-GMO, aged for 20 months. When you age it, it transforms the organic volatile compounds that are responsible for kind of the stinking rose effect and actually a little bit of pro-oxidant effect if you take too much of them. They get transformed to water-soluble compounds in the aging process and increase the sulfur, so the S-allyl cysteine goes up, why the glutathione goes up, but also different immune compounds like saccharides that help signal the immune system get produced. And so when you age it, you actually create a different compound. So it's garlic, but it's odorless, and it acquires these new additional benefits that have been shown in multiple human trials from leading leading cardiologists like Dr. Reed from University of Florida, that shows that it has this, what I call, pleiotropic effect. It acts in a variety of ways. So that's why aged garlic extract is, it's so special. Is the 800? Tell me a supplement that you know of that has 850 peer-reviewed publications and primary referee journal citations for its effect. It's one of the few, so that's why.
I say, can I ask a question that was on a list of things we were talking about, and it's green drinks. I would like to know what you think about green drinks, and should we include those every day or not include those every day? Dr. Gundry says vegetables want to kill us. So is that an issue to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
You're killing him. You're killing him.
Yes. You just tore me up with that one. I love that because it's so funny because if I go to Italy and go to Sardinia, people eat a lot of tomatoes. And they live to be 100.
Exactly, one of the longest lived areas in the world.
And they eat eggplant.
Every day.
And they walk up and down hundreds of flights of steps and up and down hills, and they go out.
And they're 80 years old.
So, yeah, exactly. And they, so anyway, green drinks, I think, are real.
Tomatoes, right?
What was that?
They peel their tomatoes.
Right. Oh my gosh, that was a good one. So I really like green drinks, but I'm really picky because most people go and buy green drinks off a shelf and they're just sugar bombs.
Yeah.
They don't read the label, and they have 88 grams of sugar in one bottle that they chug down, and they wonder why they feel bad because of their glycemic load that we talked about earlier just skyrockets on fruit sugars. And so I love green drink powders. Actually, the makers of Kyolic make great green drinks. They're non-GMO, vegan friendly. They're very clean, organic. But in general, I like green drinks that are actually green drinks. They're not fruit drinks being disguised with a little bit of a green plant put in them. Mm-hmm. So, you need to get the chlorophyll from a green drink. What's the center of a chlorophyll molecule?
Magnesium.
Exactly. Nobody ever gets that right. Look at you. You won Jeopardy just now. You got your pyramid at the same time. Oh my gosh. So, but the reality is, people don't realize just like the center of an animal protein, especially beef, is iron for hemoglobin. Mm-hmm. Chlorophyll is the equivalent. Right? So chlorophyll is the hemoglobin of a plant. And we're sorely deficient in magnesium in our culture. Just look at the NIH data on it. They talk about it in thousands of people that they've looked at, that magnesium deficiency, a functional deficiency of magnesium, is the number one cause of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes in America. Number one. And that's NIH studies. That's not me. It's not the world according to Jim. I'm just reading the studies that our government's putting out. But are we really educating people on how to get magnesium? We're not. How do you get it? Green vegetables. If you're not going to eat them, drink them. So you can get a green powder that doesn't have added sugar, that's made from good sources. I even put it. I make an avocado chocolate pudding. In our house, we make it from avocados. We add cacao, and we add green powder to it. And we teach families how to do that. So a child wants to have a little bit of a snack. Hey, have some avocado and good organic cacao with green powder mixed in it, and the cacao and the avocado hides the green drink in the little kid that doesn't want to drink a green drink. So there's all kinds of ways you can use green powder. People need to do it. It's essential to alkalinizing them because when your urine is acidic, I taught this morning. when you have acidic urine, it progresses your renovascular disease that occurs when you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. So when your pH is acidic, you melt your bones down, you become less efficient in energy production in your body, and then you also cause these complications where, your uric acid goes up, your blood vessels stay stiff, and you just progress in your illness because it is so important to get magnesium and other trace minerals in your body, and green drinks are an easy way to get it.
I think I want to focus on the one word that you said that is so important because people don't really get this, and that's progression. Someone walks in the door, oh yeah, my toe is hurting. Oh, it's been there forever. It doesn't matter. But what ends up happening after a long period of time, your toe is bad. Now you're walking wrong on your ankle. Now your ankle is bad, which creates a problem in your knee. And now your knee is bad, which creates a problem in the hip and in the lower back, which is creating headaches. They don't understand. They think, well, I've got this right now. I can live with this. They don't understand the progression that is happening, that happens with an imbalance or a dysregulation or whatever. And that is something that is important to understand, because when people understand that, they'll come in earlier for guidance because they understand This is a light, this is a beginning of progression.
Yep, absolutely. You're spot on, Corinne. I was at one point doing an experiment with vitamin D, and I made a list of every little thing that was bothering me. And interesting enough, a little extra vitamin D got rid of a few things and made my focus sharper, and I had a way to measure that. Like I had floaters in my eyes completely disappeared with a higher dose of vitamin C. It was a miracle. So we dismiss a lot of these little things. And conventional doctors do too. You might go to your doctor and say, I have floaters. Oh, they'll say, oh, that's just
Everybody at your
random
age
protein
has them.
debris. Everybody gets that. Yeah. You're making such an important point. That's already an indicator that if you didn't have perfectly clear laser vision, that's less than optimal, and we should not settle. We've been taught to settle so much.
Well, I remember Jack Benny said, when I go into doctors, I tell them I'm 35. Otherwise, if you don't say that, they'll just say, oh, well, that's just a part of aging. Don't worry about it. That's a part of aging. Don't worry about it. He says, so if you, every time you walk in the door, you say you're 35, they'll try to solve the problem.
Well, or they say, well, you're 35 now. You should expect to feel that way. It used to be 40. Now it's down into 30. Hey, you're 30 now. You should start to feel like crap. No, I think it's so important that people understand basic nutrients can make a difference, that it's important and critical to incorporate those into your lifestyle. And look, there was a great study that showed that, and this goes back to pH, and I went over this morning in my class that I taught, is that they looked at people where they managed their blood. This goes to your progression piece. They managed their blood glucose with a drug. They managed their hypertension with a drug. They managed their lipids with a drug, but it did not, over a 10-year observational study, influence the progression of their renovascular disease, their ankle brachial plexus, so what their pulse was to the extremity. It did not decrease the amount of renin-angiotensin system interventions that needed to take place, and it could not help the trend of their uric acid going up. And so, we think that, oh, my doctor gave me this drug. I got this statin now. I don't have to worry about my diet. It's taking care of my lipids. When, in fact, about 30 to 40% of those people really have more of what's called an inflammatory necrotic plaque that will cause death that ruptures, and it's not because of, oh, your lipids are high. And so I think, once again, when I talked about aged garlic, why it's important is that it reduces oxidized LDL by 88% in studies. It shows a renormalization of the endothelium with use. It reduces fatty liver. These are things that are really important for people. And in overweight people, when they took aged garlic extract, they actually reduced their inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, by 33%. And why that's important is in addition to the fact that they're inflammatory cytokines, when you upregulate your interleukin-6, your gut gets leaky. So when you combine the fact that I'm stressed out, I'm not eating right, maybe I'm on certain drug therapies, my interleukin-6 goes up, now I get a leaky gut, or what's called gut permeability change, and now I start becoming allergic or intolerant to foods. And now I'm starting to trigger more global systemic inflammation because of it. So that's why we want to work at shutting off these global inflammatory processes, kind of at the top of the pyramid. That's why I'm such a big fan of aged garlic, and why I love people taking obviously drinking green drinks, eating vegetables. I mean, we emphasize it every day that people need to make vegetables kind of the center point of their diet, and then everything else falls in behind it.
So, well, I've got these wonderful minds together, and we're being recorded. What I would like to do is to create a list that we can give to the audience. They could have, like a checklist that they could go down to prepare for these holidays, these challenging times, so they don't have to be in so much stress, and they can feel that, I always call it shields up. I always say vitamin D is like putting up your shield. I make an analogy. You're not going to go into the fight of your life, with no shield or no armor. So I'd like to discuss, maybe together we could create a list that would help people prepare and feel more secure going into these holidays.
Good with me. I mean, I love it. So you started with vitamin D.
Vitamin D, number one. Wrote it down.
Yeah, it has to be, because if you're not getting sun, which a lot of people in the U.S. in the winter months, they just aren't getting enough sun.
Especially us in New York.
Their D still low. I have people in California. I practice in California. They get sun all the time. Their vitamin D status still isn't that good.
I remember Jacob Teitelbaum did vitamin D status in Hawaii, and 50% of the women were below normal levels. We're just using sunblock, and I do believe we're washing too much. No, seriously, because
I agree.
Because sun reacts to the fat or the excretion on the skin, and then it's reabsorbed into the body and then converted to D. And we're just washing and washing and washing, and so there's no fat on our skin at all, because the minute it goes there, we wash it right off instantly. So I think it's a combination of sunblocks and washing. But fortunately we can, and what? And clothes also. But I think we can what would you recommend as a standard dose for an adult and maybe a dose for a child?
Well, standard dose for adults could be, I usually say 5,000 units 5 days a week. Take the weekend off, especially if you're not going to get your vitamin D level checked. I think people should get their vitamin D level checked and understand how they're absorbing it and where their target is, because they may need to take more. And remember, vitamin D is a retinoic acid receptor. So if you don't have adequate vitamin A, sometimes people take vitamin D and it doesn't absorb that well. And if you're deficient in vitamin A, your vitamin D receptors can't really function well. And we've kind of villainized vitamin A. It used to be you could walk into a store and see vitamin A and D together all the time.
In cod liver oil.
Right.
They've extracted the A out of the cod liver oil in many companies.
You're kidding.
No.
You're kidding.
Look at the labels.
Oh, my God.
That's right. So it's important to understand, test your vitamin D, 5,000 units 5 days a week if you're not going to test it. And think about vitamin A, incredibly important. And don't take beta-carotene.
Exactly.
You want to take retinol palmitate. You need to take real vitamin A because you can't rely on your body taking beta-carotene and converting it. And most of the beta-carotene in a supplement form is either synthetic, which is actually, I think, damaging. It's not really that good. Or it's not a natural mixed carotenoid because it's very expensive to put that in a supplement. So even if it says natural beta-carotene, if you're not getting the carotenoid family, you wouldn't even do a good job of converting it anyway. So A and D. And for a child, between 1,000 and 2,000 units a day is what the Vitamin D Council has suggested. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. That you can get a liquid vitamin D, and you can incorporate that. So that's how I see it.
They have some one drop will give 2,000, or one drop will give 1,000 of the D.
Right.
So there.
We talked about zinc.
Yeah.
We talked about magnesium, and zinc is important. We've discovered many things like the polyphenols and whatnot are zinc ionophores, which help zinc get incorporated into the cell. So that's important. Zinc has to get into the cell to actually work. It's got something like at least 500 recognized metabolic processes that it's essential for. So that's really an issue. And the people that complain of a loss of taste, that is a symptom of a zinc deficiency. So we should keep that in mind.
So an ionophore.
And smell.
Pardon?
Yeah, and smell. Taste and smell.
Now, an ionophore that helps zinc move into the cell can be green tea. So you could take your supplements with green tea. And
maybe it's already in your green drink.
Maybe it's already in your green drink. But also I think quercetin is very, very helpful. It also helps shuttle zinc into the cell where zinc can have its action. So we've got a list so far. What else do we want to add to this list?
Well, we've got zinc, A, D, and quercetin, and I agree with
and magnesium,
especially. And magnesium, so important for people's day in and day out health. And look, people can look for a high potency multi maybe as your baseline, and then add a green drink. In terms of dosing, I try to tell people, look, get 30 to 50 milligrams of zinc in a day. Quercetin, if you can do 300 milligrams, a day, drink some green tea, like you said, drink a green drink. If you're not going to do that and you want to take it as a pill, get 300 to 600 milligrams a day in. And magnesium's hard to get because, you know what, the quality of food, even when we buy organic, the mineral quality in that food is so variable. It's probably the number one thing I give to people is dosing up their magnesium, and I do it by body weight. And the kind of magnesium you buy is important, right? So, magnesium glycinate, I like a lot. Magnesium taurate, I like a lot. You can use threonate if you want to calm your nervous system down, but you don't get a lot of magnesium from it. But they showed a study in people that were overweight that when they gave them 500 milligrams of elemental magnesium a day in divided doses, that it turned off over 60 gene expressions for inflammation and metabolic disruption.
Wow, that's important.
Yep.
Go on.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's a good number to go for is about, if you're an adult, 400 to 600 milligrams of elemental magnesium a day. Just remember, if you get magnesium citrate, it tends to make your stool loose. So
move it right through. But we forgot. And go on.
No, go ahead.
Vitamin C.
Extract.
What?
Vitamin C. Eat garlic extract. We better throw in there now that we've learned about it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's key. I mean, I honestly think it's one of the most important things you can do. And it's called kyolic. That's aged garlic extract. And I think it's so important for people because it has that effect on the immune system and dampens your inflammatory response. So it's kind of like a maintenance thing. They have different formulas. They've got one for the immune system that has added things like mushrooms and olive leaf in it. I tend to recommend the Reserve, which is like the 600 milligram capsule. The dosing on aged garlic in all the clinical studies, typically what you want to get to is 1,200 to 2,400 milligrams of aged garlic extract per day.
Amazing.
That's the dosing.
Okay.
Yeah,
how many capsules would that work out to be?
1 or 2 capsules twice a day.
Okay. Then vitamin C. We forgot vitamin C. It's such a staple.
Flavonoids. But I agree. You got to have that C in there.
You got to have that C.
I love vitamin C ascorbate. I like the mixed mineral ascorbates myself, where it's bonded to minerals. And everybody's got a different opinion on how much vitamin C to take. Once you're sick, you definitely got to ramp it up because your white blood cells use up 6 times the amount of vitamin C to fight an infection versus when you're at baseline. Now, we got to remember, people that are diabetic, pre-diabetic, or obese, their immune system's working at the equivalency of a low-grade infection all the time already, so they may need to bump it up like 8 times higher than their baseline. So I usually tell people get 1 gram to 2 grams of vitamin C in a day, just as a baseline, walking around. Go get an IV. You talked about IV amino acids. Go pump yourself up with some IV vitamin C once in a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Top off that tank. Right?
Definitely.
So important.
Time flies when we're having fun, and this has been so much fun, and it just flew.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I know, and we're just getting started. I really enjoy speaking with you, Jim. I love your insights. So
well, thank you.
I want to thank you for being here with us. I want to thank Carol. Thank you, Carol. Every time we're together, I learn. We will be back next week. Prepare yourself. We're going into a special time. We're here, and we've been here sharing how we can literally put our shields up and protect ourselves, our families, and our community. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
So we'll be back next week. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
In conclusion, I'd like to say, remember this information is not an attempt to diagnose or a substitute for treatment. As always, we urge you to take this and all other information we share with you up with your healthcare practitioner. Clearly, this comes under the category of taking charge of your health. You can hear this program in its entirety on my Facebook, Corinne Fernari, RPA, CCN, or on Take Charge of Your Health Facebook page, Take Charge of Your Health. My website is fernarihealth.com, and my office number is 212-219-0700. That's 212-219-0700. And I know many of you noticed that beautiful music, A Big Change. My brother's group wrote it for me, Left Hook from Redding, California. Their website is Redding Left Hook. Really special. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.